Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about clever solutions. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what was the most clever solution you came up with for a difficult programming problem? Well, thinking about it, being clever has never really been my strong suit, but I suppose I could give you one example at the top of my head. We had, this is going to be a little bit of a story time now. I was working for a company where we had an integration with an external company, and they basically were going to send us a ton of data so that we could run some analysis on the data that they had in their system. Now, the format of that data was fairly old, and the data sources that data came from was several different systems that were not consistent. Now, what we needed to do was basically to convert and massage that data into a format that our system could that it could consume. And as you can imagine, that's a bit of a problem because there's quite a lot of data. And so I had a discussion, or rather, well, I don't really discuss these things. I try to, because I always find myself in the situation where things very easily become a confrontation if you have people who are very strongly opinionated about things. I try to always approach things with, I have some thoughts, and then I put them next to the conversation, and if somebody sees a value in those thoughts, they will pick up on it, and if not, I'm just going to leave them there and move on with my day. Because pushing things usually, well, it's a risky thing to do. So said and done, I talked to my coworkers about this, and so my PO goes in and basically announces to the company, after talking to my coworkers, who were the people who originally estimated the work, and said, well, the formatting of this data and like getting this into our system and all that good stuff, it's going to be a month's 2 months. I think it was even up to like the total scope of building the entire feature was like estimated to 3 months, something like that. And so that's kind of what they said, and I went, well, no, I think that's probably overdoing it a little bit. And I said, I suppose that like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could do this in, say, a week, or just say 3 days, something like that, if you just give me the data. And everybody kind of just looked at me like I was like joking, and I said, no, I think I can do it in 3 days. And they said, oh, pray tell, Frederick, how are you going to do that in 3 days? And I go, well, because I mean, I can't even imagine how you arrived at that monstrous number for the whole feature. So what I usually like to say is that any feature that comes at face value, depending on like what you're saying, I actually got famous at that company for saying any estimation was 2 developers 2 weeks, because on average, depending on how you define the scope, that is how long it will take to deliver a standard feature from scratch. Everything from getting the requirements to building the first proof of concept is going to take roughly that amount of time, and then you iterate and actually build a nicer version of the whole thing. So I said, I think that the problem here is that you and the others have made a set of assumptions on how to convert this data. And my guess is the reason why you think that it's going to take so long is because you haven't thought about like the simple solution here, because the value that we're looking for is just to get the data into our format, into the system, and that is not something that requires us to like restructure all our models and all this like changing all of our business logic and all this stuff that you guys have been talking about, or trying to build the whole feature. Let's just get the data in the right format so that our system can display the information towards the user, so that the the MVP is done. And when the MVP is done, we can showcase that, get some feedback on it, and then get the whole thing back. And I said, well, okay, sure. If you think you can do this in 3 days, then go for it. And I did, because it was that's why I cannot understand. Like, I wasn't in the meeting So I don't know how they arrived at that monstrous number, because all I did was that, okay, so here is a gigantic file, or like several files, of CSV values with format, like different formats, like it was very inconsistent, and all I really needed to do was to figure out, all right, this is the data model that I need, and this is the data that I have. And some of the formatting and so forth is wrong, so I'll create some scripts in JavaScript that just converts all of the different formats to one consistent format. And then I write that directly to the database. And that's when I realized that the people that I was working with, they had this notion which makes me kind of understand the problem that they thought that they had. And the notion they had was that if you're going to push data to the database, it has to go through the network layer first, or through like the through the application. And I said, why? It's just data. And they go, well, we have all these business rules and all this business logic that on top of all of this stuff, right? So we want to make sure that nothing, like that, all of this stuff is like consistent and it doesn't break anything, etc., etc. And I go, yeah, it's just that if you're gonna structure, like if you're going to seed the database through the network layer, that's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's really not worth it, because at the end of the day, I'm doing this once. I'm checking everything, and like I have like a sample data. I know what I need to put in the database. I don't have to run it through all of our business logic, because it's a very simple data model. It's just records that, well, this is the data we have. If our domain model, or like our business model, doesn't work for this data, then it's not usable to us. Then we need to occupy it some way. So just running it through a bunch of logic we know it's going to abide by doesn't really make any sense. So said and done. I just wrote it directly to the database. Took like a tenth of what the original estimation was. Don't know if that was very clever. It was a fairly straightforward thing, but after that I think the PO was kind of, at least I got some commendation for that, because you know, out of a team of software developers, I had the one idea that made the difference. So that was fun. So what I want you to take away from this is that sometimes you get lucky, you think about something in a way that other people are not thinking about. My only tip that I can give you is that I like to have a thought process with my software developers and my coworkers that is very similar to if you've watched the show House. So in that show, Dr. House has his team of other doctors. Now in this case, he's like, you know, he's supposed to be this ironic douchebag and like better than everybody else. And that's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to say that the way that he arrives at a diagnosis or like a solution to whatever problem, and the way that they work there, is that he will just say thoughts to the rest of the team. He's not concerned so much with being correct or just stating things to the group in order to make a proposition or something like that. He's airing thoughts at all, like from all angles. He's everything from saying something that, well, I'm thinking maybe we should consider this or we should consider that, and I do that all the time. Like I will just speak to the group, not to a specific person. I will just say, when somebody has a suggestion or they have an idea, and I will start saying things such as, well, that is true, we could do it this way, but we could also do it that way. We could do it this way, we could do it that way. You just list out all the thoughts you have on the topic. And I found what's really nice about that is that, I mean, a lot of stuff that you say a lot of it's not going to be useful. But if you do that, you create these opportunities for other people to spin off on things and have their own thoughts and their own ideas, and it's proven very effective for me to do this in order to arrive at a good idea within the group. And having that kind of freestyle thing where people are more inclined to just share their thoughts on something and the things that they are thinking about a topic, it usually leads to much better conclusions than if you sit by yourself in your own head and just think until you find something that you're, comfortable enough to share. Because if you go by it that way, at least I've found it takes longer to arrive at like a good solution, and usually you might miss out on a lot of thoughts that somebody has had, but they just didn't feel comfortable sharing it. And sometimes even the simplest, dumbest solution, or like something that isn't really the thing that everybody else is thinking, it actually turns out to be the best solution. But in order for you to feel comfortable sharing those sorts of thoughts, you need to get into the habit of not being so concerned with whether or not you have, like, every time you open your mouth you're saying something smart. Don't try to say one smart thing. Try to say 100 things that are relevant, and maybe one or two of them are going to turn out to be really genius. Have a great day.